April 1st of 2019. We've just come out of executive session, and our first item of business is item 4, vote to approve the settlement agreement with Harvard University concerning Estabrook Road litigation. We have a motion.
I move that the select board authorize the town manager to enter into a settlement agreement with Harvard College in the form and on the terms and conditions as set forth in the document entitled Settlement Agreement between the Town of Concord and President and Fellows of Harvard College for limited public access to a portion of Estabrook Trail, and in accordance therewith, to dismiss without prejudice claims against Harvard College brought by the town in litigation entitled Town of Concord v. Neely Rasmussen et al. Case number 17, miscellaneous 000605 HPS, currently pending in the Land Court Department of the Massachusetts Trail.
Second. Second. Any discussion or ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
I will now read the statement that Harvard has agreed can be read tonight following the settlement. We are pleased to announce that the town is entering into a settlement agreement with Harvard College that allows the public to continue to make low-impact recreational use of the portion of Estabrook Trail that crosses Harvard-owned property in Estabrook Woods. The settlement agreement and the rules for use of the trail through Harvard's land will be posted on the town website shortly. We want to emphasize the importance of public compliance with the rules that Harvard and the town have agreed upon for use of the trail, and the importance of our collective stewardship of Estabrook Woods. We thank Harvard for working cooperatively with the town to achieve these goals. The agreement will be posted online shortly, and Chris, I guess you will be.
I just signed the two originals of the document, and we will post that document on the town website tomorrow and have copies available tomorrow.
We thought that it probably would be best to take public comments, if there are any, at this time regarding this issue. If anybody would like to make a comment or have a question or the comments, please come forward. If not, we will move to the consent agenda. Town accountant warrants, one-day special licensing, Concord Museum for June 16th, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. to Lexington Road, malts only, 51 Walden, Inc. on April 6th, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., 54 Walden Street, wine and malt. Minutes from February 26th, PH, and then public hearing, March the 4th and March the 11th, and proclamation of National Library Week of April 7th through the 17th. Whereas today's libraries are not just about books, but what they can do for and with people. Whereas libraries for all types are at the heart of cities, towns, schools, and campuses. Whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions where people of all backgrounds can be together and connect. Whereas libraries and librarians build strong communities through transformative services, programs, and expertise. Whereas libraries which promote the free exchange of information and ideas for all are cornerstones of democracy. Whereas libraries promote civic engagement by keeping people informed and aware of community events and issues. Whereas libraries and library workers partner with the civic organization to make sure the community's needs are being met. Whereas libraries and librarians empower their communities to make informed decisions by providing free access to information. Whereas libraries are a resource for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status by offering services and educational resources that transform lives and strengthens communities. And whereas libraries, librarians, library workers, and supporters across America are celebrating National Library Week, now therefore be it resolved that the Concord Select Board proclaim National Library Week, April 7 through 13, 2019. Encourage all residents to visit Concord Free Public Library this week and explore what is new at your library and engage with your librarian. Because of you and our library leaders, libraries transform. Thank you. And we now, I guess, town manager's report.
We have a motion. We need a motion.
We need a motion, I'm sorry, that's right.
I move to approve the consent agenda as well.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now.
Mr. Chairman, I have about a dozen items here, so I'll try to go through them quickly. Just a reminder that the compost site and paint shed on Walden Street will be open Saturday, April 6th, and will resume on Wednesday evenings as well this season. The semi-annual drop-off swap-up event at Public Works has been scheduled for May 4th. Middlesex Savings Bank has vacated the Visitor Center on Main Street where they were located over the winter, and the Visitor Center is scheduled to open for the season on the 12th of April. Minuteman Media Network has hired a new station manager to manage our PEG Access television services. Anya Zulawik previously has worked in Westford and Harvard, so she has a lot of experience. The deputy town manager is pursuing an easement with Mass DOT to cross the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to access the Giroux land. Otherwise, it'd be necessary for us to retain an access easement through the land the board hopes to transfer to the housing authority. So by getting alternate access, that we can give the land to the housing authority free and clear if that's your wish. I signed a purchase and sale, or an offer to purchase the property of the Emerson land on Walden Street, which is the subject of two different CPA funding article and a town funding article, total of $200,000 for about 6.5 acres, subject to town meeting approval. Kate Hodges, the deputy town manager, is planning to have a second public forum on White Pond. She's looking at early May. The natural resources folks have agreed to participate in that to answer any questions about agriculture. So the date hasn't been picked, but sometime in May, before the beach opens, there'll be a second White Pond forum. Friday is the deadline for wireless carriers to submit a response to our request for proposals. We had to extend the deadline on that because we erred in not publishing it twice in the local newspaper, so we had to re-advertise, and the new deadline is this coming Friday. Public Works wants it known that on April 17th, Wednesday, April 17th, Cambridge Turnpike will be closed for about 6 months while the bridge over the Mill Brook is removed and replaced. So there'll be an extended detour, unfortunately. And the Public Works Department is also coordinating the cut-through traffic study. We've commissioned a traffic engineer to look at about 40 intersections in town that have problems with traffic cutting through from other towns. Tuesday, May 6th, here in the townhouse is when residents will have an opportunity to meet the engineer and provide their comments and observations on cut-through traffic. And finally, Warner's Pond Dredging, the natural resources folks have submitted an environmental notification form, and the EOA people from the state visited last week, so they do expect to get a certificate on the environmental notification on the dredging of Warner's Pond, a portion of Warner's Pond. Thank you.
Can you say the date for the closure of the Cambridge Turnpike again?
It's effective Wednesday, April 17th, so just
For 6 months.
Just around the corner for about 6 months.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Good. I'll be fairly brief. As people know, we have town meetings coming up next week. And we had the town vote last Tuesday. There are going to be 2 new members of the school board and 2 new members of the select board. So congratulations to all of those, and thank you for the participation. The vote was somewhat over 11%, which was higher than what we've been having, so that was good news as well. We're now ready, I guess, to annual request to fire the town cannons at public ceremonies, Concord Independent Battery. The There was a letter from John Arenas to the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee, to James Finnegan with the Concord Independent Battery, requesting that, providing them a schedule for their participation, and we've received a letter from Mr. Finnegan, which had a number of different backup items. He also provided a certificate of liability insurance, permit for a cannon fire from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, a map of the location where the firing would take place, and signatures of an alcohol beverage and controlled substance agreements with the people. Ah, you're here. We'll be firing, so welcome.
Thank you.
And please identify yourself, and that we are being recorded. I should have mentioned that at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
James Finnegan, I'm the president of the Concord Independent Battery Association. To my left is the treasurer, is the secretary of our organization, and to his left is the captain of the Concord Independent Battery, Peter Mayette. I'm sorry, I missed. This is Philip Kenny. He's a corporate officer of our association.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
And if you just give us a brief description and...
I will. We receive every year from the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee a request for our participation in their events. Their events are actually, the authorized events for the town are Miriam's Corner Exercise, which happens this coming Saturday on April 6th, Patriots Day, April 15th, the parade itself. We have a dawn salute on April 19th, the actual historic day. Memorial Day ceremonies to commemorate all of the fallen Concordians from present and past, and Veterans Day ceremonies. And also this year, I'm also seeking permission to use the town's cannons. As we do, we seek permission with the public ceremonies events to use the town cannons. In addition, we've received correspondence from the United States Navy and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to participate again in the Vietnam remembrance and commemoration ceremonies, which are held in Boston. So I'm seeking permission to move the guns for one day only into the city. We attended last year. We moved them to Fort Independence, and as the Constitution with a whole assembly of Vietnam veterans on board, as they pass, we fire a shore battery salute, and then the Constitution actually returns a salute from Boston Harbor toward us. And the last request I have, it's a Concord event. We received correspondence from the Melvin Memorial Rededication Committee to participate in their event on June 16th, which is a Sunday. We're delighted to get these invitations, and we seek permission of the town to participate.
You certainly enhance all of the events that you do attend. There's very much of an added benefit to those who come. They're wonderful. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Does anybody have any questions or?
Well, this is more a point of interest. I read one of the documents, I don't know if it was from the Navy or one of the other groups, commending you for your previous participation and inviting you back this year. Are there other batteries such as yourself that are shooting the cannons?
In the past, we fired with the 101st Field Artillery, which is part of the Mass National Guard. So our cannons, we fire fairly slowly. They can fire very rapidly, so we will fire the first round, they'll fire 19 rounds, and we will fire the last for a 21-gun salute.
And do we have the oldest?
I would believe so, yes. Yes.
With the cannons that the town presently owns, we believe they were cast in 1846.
But it was dedicated in 1804. I mean,
Yes, the charter
the charter
of,
started in 1804.
correct.
We ready for a motion?
Okay. So, I move to approve the Concord Independent Battery's request to fire the town cannons at town celebrations on April 6th, April 15th, April 19th, May 27th, and November 11th. And
Do we have a second on that? And we'll- All those in favor? Aye. And we have a second one.
And a further request to fire the town cannons at the USS Constitution event, the Melvin Memorial Rededication, and Marion Corner exercises, Concord Independent Battery. Move to approve the Concord Independent Battery request to fire the town cannons at the USS Constitution event, May 17th, Melvin Memorial Relocation, June 16th, and the Marion Corner exercise, which I think we also covered it April 6th.
A second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you so much, and,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Safe one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ready to discuss Article 16 of the Concord Carlisle Regional High School Capital Project. The
These are also hard copies, I don't know how they will get. We have it up on the screen.
school board always gives us reading material, so I didn't get the wrong habit here.
Always want to believe your students.
Little homework.
Um,
You would begin by identifying yourself and then.
Yes, Joanna Boynton, member of the Concord Carlisle Regional High School, School Committee, not the high school.
Jared Stanton, Director of Finance and Operations to the schools.
Lori Hunter, Superintendent.
Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for allowing us to tell our stories here collectively with you. And hopefully we can I can do this quickly, this overview of how we got to asking for this at town meeting. I do want to just quickly say that Lori and Jared reached out to Rich Rain, and he has been terrific, and they've been working quite a bit, last, I think, probably 2 weeks. So they'll be able to update you on that and where Rich is with his help on this project.
We do have an email.
Oh, super. Okay. Well, if you know, when we get to the end and Jared has spoken to him the most and he fills in anything, and any questions that there might be, then we'll have that chance. All right, so Article 16. Article 16 requests the approval for funds for the following things on the high school campus. The reconstruction, to reconstruct the access road, to install lighting along that access road, repair sidewalks and curbing, and restore lost parking spaces. The next slide shows the overview of what areas we're talking about. The access road, sometimes called the Loop Road in the old days. That's essentially the driveway from one entrance is on Thoreau Street, one's on Walden Street. It runs around up in front of BD Center. That's the yellow. And the green is the parking location for the additional parking that we are proposing in this. Now, to give a little background, the old high school was on the new parking lot in 2015 when we moved into the new CCHS building. So originally, when we moved into the building, the access, the old building hadn't been demolished, so we were still parking on the old parking lots. The access road had not been repaired and restored and reconstructed. It was in the original project for the high school, and when we found that we had considerable abatement beyond what was estimated, some of the things that were value engineered out were things that we thought would be easiest to come back at some point and finish. So that was in the spring of 2015, and the demolition of the old building was happening. In that fall, we finally had the old building was gone and taken care of, and the new parking lot came online. and the old parking lot went offline for remediation. The campus at that time went from 548 legal parking spots on campus to 413. The result since then, so we're in our 4th year, has been considerable stress for families and for administration. So we are proposing to restore 104 of those spaces. The way in which we've gotten there, there's a number of things that's happened in the last 4 years. When we opened that new parking lot, we got a lot of concerned citizens, families, coming to school committee, coming to administration, very upset about the limited parking. We, as a school committee, the administration at the time proposed we could do an engineering study and do some gravel parking spots over off on the side, ironically, pretty much where it's been proposed for this project. But the school committee, for a lot of the reasons that even today people would like to find alternatives, said we don't want to do that. Let's wait and see if, the reduced number of spots actually will change behavior, and that we will, find that people can get used to that. Let's not just react to it. In the following years, candidly, the pressure has been there every year. We've tried multiple things to relieve it, including assigning the faculty all at a particular, the parking lot up by the turf. We rented spaces from BD. That was something we tried. Caused a lot of stress with BD and their business, and likewise students using passes as members of BD also to park in there, and it didn't make for good neighbors. So we didn't continue that process, program. We did number the spaces, hoping to improve the situation. Just to give you a little bit example of that, along the loop road, access road that we're talking about restoring, they weren't numbered, but the kids were parking there. So it wasn't that we've actually increased parking, it's just we tried to control it. Because kids were coming very early in the morning to grab those spots, the few that there were, oftentimes defeating the purpose of our later start time, to get there early, maybe even sleep in the car, and be sure they had their spot for the end of school. And then there's certain things like carpool challenges and that kind of thing we've tried. Again, just hasn't taken the air out of the pressure for the administration up on campus. Additionally, since 2015, at the school committee level, we decided to form a committee and really look at what the possibilities were for the campus, including parking, but to kind of look at campus as a whole, with administrators, with citizens. They had several forums, public sessions, and in a year's time did a pretty comprehensive report of options and things that came up from people, including a track, including amenities building, and parking rose every time in all those conversations really as a priority. And I will say that the administration is really hoping for, in particular, this relief because of the amount of time they spend navigating it. The Campus Oversight Committee was a committee that was then formed as a result to say, okay, let's actually put something to plan of how we could put these things on the campus. Because the concern came, well, if we are going to advocate for parking, which kept rising to the top, what if we put it somewhere and then we want to come back and put a track and it's in the way and we're digging up the work we've done? So the Oversight Committee was sort of tasked with figuring out how to, who to hire and look at sort of a feasibility study for fitting these things. They didn't have too much priority. We wanted to know if they could fit and where, what that might look like. So Gale Associates was engaged to conduct this feasibility study, and that was at the end of last summer. And then one other thing that we've worked with since the Gale study, which I'll get into, is that the superintendent formed a sustainability committee, because a lot of the reaction to this is, it's counter to our philosophy and our goals in town. And one of the top priorities for this group has been to look at parking, and it includes the school community, and it's included the start of the town. Kate Hamlin's been part of that conversation, discussing grants, discussing brainstorming right now. Because it became pretty clear that we needed a more comprehensive approach to really transportation. And it's probably not just a school regional thing, but I know in the long range plan, transportation is another priority of looking how we do that and how can we be sustainable in the, and also address the needs of our kids, our families, which really have been the pressure point. So, despite our best efforts, the capacity remains inadequate for this. Many drivers don't have spaces like juniors. Some consider that to be a privilege. That's kind of how we approached it. We said, well, we'll just take the drivers, the junior drivers out of the mix. But the issue with that is that there are a lot of families that rely on when those juniors and some seniors, but when they can drive and what they allow, what the reasons they're going, which I'll get into. But another aspect of it is there very little to no parking for visitors. We have 10 official visitor parking spaces. That things that happen at the high school, and one of the great things about our high school is it's being used more and more as a community resource. But we have incredible teachers that have outside speakers come, outside programs come. In fact, I've talked to the principal about recently a play was coming in to be performed for one group, and they had a speaker coming in, and they had to block off the visitor parking spaces to anybody so that these people could park there. And parents who came for IEP meetings or other things had no place to park it. Again, they come in with a fair amount of frustration when they're visiting the school. The Parents Association meetings are often plagued by frustration in this regard, as are the principal's coffees. It's just not enough visitor parking. So they get creative, or they don't go, or they park on the lawn, where they can find space. Large community events are also challenging. Just back to school night is a challenge. Just having all the parents come back, and there was parking all over the grass, and places that were resulted in leaving. Took 40 minutes sometimes for some people way at the top of the turf to even get out that evening. Of course, we'd like to be able to accommodate more for town meeting. So a lot of that is to point out that it's not just students and families, but also visitors and holding community events, which we want to do. And the school is being used from dawn to beyond dusk, late in the evening. So candidly, this continued stress for students and families. For families and kids who we are really working hard to reduce that, but also for the administration, it's a big distraction, and it's a big time-consuming thing. Just a quick example, that they were having candidates come as assistant principal candidates come back for interviews, and they had to again, cone off all the visiting spots, and then cause an awful lot of conversation and stress around the others coming to visit, and it's a daily, often daily stress. Very quickly, why do students drive to school? Why do they need to? Why can't they take the late bus? There's a number of reasons. We've talked about the jobs that kids have after school. Often people have a kid. I know my oldest, when she could drive, was tasked with a lot of help with the other kids and the rides and the taking care of siblings. Some of the actual CCH teams practice off campus, for example, ice hockey, because we don't have a rink. Fencing, golf, we don't, those can't be done on campus. So kids drive to the practice, and when the older kids, upperclassmen, can drive, they're tasked with making sure the team gets there. So they, in fact, take some of the kids, and as you know, I think, your first 6 months of driving, you can't take kids. So, once you get your driver's license, it's not often that you can also carpool. But I knew the kids do to these teams. The club sports world has exploded. All kinds of places these kids are going. They're rowing in Cambridge, they're playing soccer in Lancaster, fencing, cross-country skiing, and it's very real, and they're great programs, and they often carpool the kids who play on these teams and go together, but they are going places. And likewise, music, a lot of the music performances and lessons that some of these kids do is often all the way in Boston, and we've heard a lot about those kids. So there's a lot of reasons. So these kids in the late bus doesn't accommodate it. Some kids, we've talked to some families who say the late bus, just doesn't even get them back in time, and it's a number of reasons, mostly around the timing for these families. So it's not just a privilege. I'm sure there are those kids for that, where that's the case, but it can't be treated just as a privilege for kids to drive to school, because there are a lot of very good reasons why they need to get where they need to get to after school. So Gale did their work. They proposed this location in large part because it was accommodating all the other possible future projects, which could be years. We didn't want to find ourselves not having done the broad scope of where to put it so it wouldn't get dug up for something else. They've given an estimated cost of just over $790,000 to do that work. There's a lot of unknowns, so it's a very conservative number. This is also something that Rich is helping us with. And it was done so that it would not impede other, future projects. The other aspect of this article, which gets a little less attention, is the access road reconstruction. And that is basically that the road is in very poor condition, with sunken utility covers and cracks and patches, and we've had a flat tire up there from one of the potholes. Some of the, if you see the curbing on the sidewalks is just really damaged. It would be, while it's ADA accessible and we're compliant, it would be a challenge on crutches or a walker or in a wheelchair. It would be it's dicey. It's not an even sidewalk, and the lighting isn't great. One of the things we learned when one went out, a couple years ago, was that the light posts actually on the old access road were rotted out. So we just took them all down. We put a couple replacements to be sure. Kids go to BD for swimming and diving. It's often dark in the winter at those times. So it's a safety issue. And there's a couple slides with some pictures, but I think most of you have seen it. And it's just, more an issue of that it's long overdue, it's safety, and it's also just making sure the ADA accessibility really is done well. That reconstruction includes things like estimated new gravel subbase and compaction and paving and lighting and granite curbing. So at the moment, at that time, Gale Associates estimated that cost to be just over $1.2 million to do all that work. So as a quick summary, and I think then Jared and or Lori might update you with Rich's, some of the stuff you've seen in the email, but for the public, kind of where that work has gone, which has been just tremendous. It's been really terrific what he's done. The school committee is requesting a $2 million article to complete these two projects. That's $1.5 million to Concord, roughly, and roughly $500,000 to Carlisle. We hope and anticipate that these numbers would be less. They're very conservative. There's a lot of issues around drainage, and some of the unknowns in the permitting is that this entire campus is in the Water Conservancy District. So that requires all boards almost entirely to have some recommendations and weighing in before anything's permitted. So we believe if they're done together, we can save in those efficiencies of the work and estimating them together. And when Gale provided these estimates, they were standalone items. So the hope is if we have some of the same operations, we might get some economies of scale. Down at the bottom is just based on FY20 assessment ratios and the 10-year replacement schedule. FY21 assessment impact would be for Concord just over $210,000, or for the median household $2.40 a month, roughly $28 a year, to give people a sense of what that is. And then I think the last slide is a total, so you can see how it's broken out. And I would turn to Jared and Lori if you want to add anything, or
Yeah,
the update's great actually.
Yeah, I mean, we can't thank Rich enough. He has taken on the entire design of the access roadway, so Jared can give you highlights of that. He's still a work in progress, though, so I think we should talk timeline a little bit tonight. I know you were looking to take a position, and the question might be whether you want to wait for Rich to finish. So we got information at the same time you did at 5 o'clock this afternoon to put all of our conversations to paper. So we'll go through the highlights quickly of what Rich's group has been doing for us.
First, I want to echo how much I want to thank Chris, Rich and Chris Albright publicly for all of the work they've done, for how many phone calls they've taken, how many emails they have answered of mine and explained it. I talked to Rich about 5 o'clock tonight, and I believe you saw the email, hot off the press, and then he has some preliminary numbers for us, but they're still preliminary. I'm still going through them. But what they did is they went out and they did a survey and design of the access road. That alone, soft costs that Gale was saying that would cost us about $111,000. they saved us that amount. We're paying a little bit of overtime to them, but about a net of about 106,000. We think it's going to be about 5,000 in overtime. So they've been out surveying and doing all of that for us. Some of the highlights that they looked at and sent us in that email tonight, including the lighting, the drainage, the curbing, and the sidewalks. The lighting in this email might stick out a little bit. It's about double the cost of what Gail had suggested, but we think it's a little excessive, the 100 feet spacing on there, so there might be some savings in that area. Another area of savings is in the reclaimed road, so we think we can recycle that. But overall, they came up with an estimate, a very conservative estimate of $1,194,327, which is a difference of roughly $30,000 on what Gail had come up with. But until his numbers are finalized, they're still preliminary.
So they're doing some look at the parking, not as extensively. It won't be a full design, but that is actual work that's still ongoing. So you're getting sort of that status update of the work they've done in literally 10 days. So we're enormously grateful for the additional information. And I think Rich would probably say he was skeptical of some of the Gale numbers, and they're proving fairly on track, give or take swings of different directions. So we're feeling really thoroughly researched in terms of what Gale offered, and the swings are very well documented and coming together. So we're anxious to hear more from Rich, but it is going to take him the rest of this week to finish that. So we wanted you to have that information tonight. I think, we would ask that you consider waiting to hear from him to take a position before town meeting. Obviously, that's your decision, but we thought that might be thoughtful if we all had the same closure going into Monday night.
I agree completely with waiting until we get the final numbers here. But just so independent of positions and stuff, suppose it comes in at some other number that's lower than what you guys have now. Would you simply revise the request?
We can only borrow the amount that the project costs. So if this number holds and we do the $1.2 million, if the project costs, say, $1 million, that we would not borrow that.
I understand that, but it's in terms of what you go to the town to ask for.
Yeah, the school committee's meeting before town meeting as well. So if there's a solid number lower than the 2 million, we would certainly consider reducing that.
Have you spoken with just as precaution, have you spoken with the moderator to how much she will allow you to?
We're talking a lot with Carmen on this article, so there's a lot of moving pieces and some possible motions on the floor, so she's pretty
But it sounds
well
like preliminary
informed.
numbers, you would be within the traditional 10% variance of what the moderator usually.
Yeah, we need to see what the numbers are, but we're in constant communication with her, so we will certainly continue to be.
I would agree putting it off. I'm wondering, we did get an email from Julie Ann Cancio raising the issue of contaminated soils. Is the soil being tested, and what is the status of that?
So I think she's referring to the landfill, which is completely contained, and we must abide by the acceptable use policy of the space. So the parking itself is permitted. Should we have to go in to put any lights in, then there's a very structured procedure we must follow, and we will be highly monitored and regulated for that to avoid any ongoing contamination. So we are going to be highly watched as we do anything on that landfill.
It does seem that you would be able to install lighting and comply with.
Yes.
The area that touches the landfill is largely not on the landfill, all of this. So it's those areas, yes, would be highly monitored, and we'd have to work with, I think, even the EPA probably,
Yes.
alongside us if we disturb any of that, getting approvals from them as well. Ideally, we don't have to in that area. Ideally, you could light it such that that doesn't need to have a lamp post in that area.
The lighting effect on the neighbors, that has been vetted in some way?
It's being vetted as we speak. Part of even look at the access road recommendation, which has extensive lighting. We're talking with Rich about potentially even cutting that in half. So we're very, very aware and trying to be thoughtful about the impact.
Yeah, the current lighting now is very different than the way driveways and parking lots could be lit in the past, and much more direct and lower, I don't know if the right terminology is wattage or, yeah, so it can be quite directed, and ideally, yes, working with the neighbors that it's understood, and we really do the minimum to disrupt anything on Bristers Hill Road.
I think it was Alice who originally recommended that you reach out to Rich and his group, and thank you for doing that.
It's been great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My concern on all of this is I know you put $2.40 per household for parking. When they graduate from high school and college, get a job, people are not going to be paying for the parking. I'm wondering why there's not a scheme where each of the parking spaces are paid for by the students who are parking there. And those funds, I believe you do something like $300 a season, and if you're getting 104 new spaces, that's over $30,000 a year. If those funds were being used over a number of years, you'd pretty well pay for this just itself.
Well, that would be a number of years to pay for the parking, but I think what part of the sustainability committee is, and Lori can speak more to it, but is also looking at is what are those opportunities with those funds. We haven't, again, the whole discussion around transportation, parking, sustainability needs to be sort of comprehensive with the kids and the teachers and administrators and people invested in this. As a school that is, green schools, sustainable principles, all that. And so those conversations are rich with all kinds of ideas, including how to work with those funds. So the kids actually, I don't know, my house, my kid had to pay for that parking. So they would pay their $300 to park for the year. And, ideally, now we look at with this additional, I think there's opportunities for that. And again, you guys have talked a little about it, but with just nothing firm, but it became something that was obviously an opportunity to figure out how to address some of these sustainable aspects, or more sustainable.
there's only so much money. We're looking at a fairly substantial middle school project, and I wonder if this is kind of a priority that we're asking a lot of our citizens. But
Yep, we know that.
I'm open still, but skeptical.
In terms of the fees that you were just asking about, the committee will consider, once we have that revenue, it's not revenue right now until we have the spots, right, the chicken and the egg. But we need a vehicle to if you borrow money and revenue comes in somewhere else, there needs to be a way to get the revenue to the debt, and there isn't an automatic way to do that right now. So committee would definitely consider how that funding would be used. I think in terms of the ask, I think it is a big ask to be here multiple times for multiple buildings. I would really like to see this high school project closed and finished, because what will happen is if this doesn't happen now, we are going to come back. And at that point, we're even deeper into discussing potentially a middle school. And I don't know when the good time is. And the needs at the high school are ongoing and real, and it does feel like if we could just put closure to that project, we then move on and talk about it. But I appreciate the magnitude of the ask this year, no question.
Well, I think you would, to Tom's point, I think you were hitting on that, both Joanna and Lori. We're not talking about the funds purely from the 100+ site new parking spots. We're talking about the funds that would be collected from all the parking spots on the campus. And that seems like a larger conversation and one that's ongoing and one that hopefully will bear a lot of different fruit over time. And, you know, may lead us into other
Yeah.
directions.
Yeah.
So I can't read this discussion without saying something. For me, it's not an issue of how much the project costs. I'm not going to be persuaded by the cost of a parking lot. I feel strongly that this is a problem of privilege, that our children are so engaged in so many different aspects of their lives, and that we as citizens should pay for that. And I feel a moral imperative that we have to play our part in solving climate change at home, and that we can have a sustainability committee dealing with big issues of sustainability while we're not living the principles that we're teaching our kids. So for me, whether it costs, you know, $700,000 or $800,000, whether the kids pay for it themselves, what's the message that we give our children if we allow them to buy their way out of a climate crisis? It's not the solution that's sustainable. So my problem is not how we're going to fund it or what the cost of funding is. It's in general principle that we encourage the use of an automobile, and we have to be looking at other transportation options. Off-site parking, whether we run shuttle buses, whether we use our buses differently, whether we have to rethink this. As we move, we know education changes over time. We currently, when we built the school, a decision was made at the time the landfill was remediated not to put parking lot. We're back a few years later asking for parking in a different location because we'd already decided we didn't need the parking spaces when that was made as a passive recreation because other priorities were stated, possibly a gym, a running track. There were other concepts that were considered. And as I look forward into what happens in the educational process, and you know way more than I do, off-site learning is growing. And if we start building parking spaces that allow more kids to be on-site and driving their cars every day, and at a time when we may be moving to off-site learning, it seems like a mistake to pave more asphalt and encourage cars to be on campus more. If you know as well as I do, you build a lane of traffic, you build a parking lot, it'll be used, it'll be filled.
I would say, Laura, that I hope the committee would look at the additional revenue and be able to make some kind of commitment. We might not know how to get the job done yet, but I'm sure we can figure that out. So to make it clear that even though it may seem like a relatively small amount of money, if we go forward with that, that money is going to contribute to the project. It has nothing to do with Alice's remark at all, but it has to do with, this is additional revenue. Why wouldn't it be dedicated to reducing the cost of the project to the citizens of town?
Sure.
I can't think of a reason why it shouldn't. So I would hope rather than just consider it, we could get some kind of a commitment that this money, even though you're perfectly correct, I don't know exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
But I bet there's a way.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
We are now ready, I guess, to take position on the warrant articles that we haven't read yet. And those are 16, 23, 25, and 26.
16 we're going to postpone.
I think that I would be in favor of that. I'm not sure if you voted on that yet, but
Well, I would move for Article 16 that we postpone taking a decision on Article 16 until we gather some additional information from the Public Works Department and we hear back from the schools about the use of that additional revenue.
Second?
all in favor? Aye. Thank you all. So we're now ready for 23, which is the $500,000 from free cash. Yes. Anybody want to begin with the discussion on that, or?
Well, I'll put a motion on the floor, I move affirmative action on Article 23.
Second?
Do we need any discussion? I think it makes sense. We've got, fortunately, free cash, I think came in something like almost 9% this year, so well above even the 10%. And this was an initial kind of funding jump starting, and I think it makes a lot of sense, so. All those in favor? Aye. In the position, okay. 25 is the real estate transfer tax for affordable housing.
So I'm gonna hand you a document, and it's just a document that highlights the changes that we are proposing in Article 25 that were not included in the original motion. So they are that there is a $600,000 exemption that's in place for the property tax. So if you have $1 million home, the taxes apply only to $400,000. And then the second is that under Section 2, number 3, to add, Section 2 is excluded, what is excluded from this property tax. And to add an exclusion, the transfers of real property subject to affordable housing restrictions are exempt from this. So we're trying to do affordable housing. Doesn't seem right to say, well, guess what? You have to pay an additional fee to that. And then lastly, Section 7, which we have talked about before. Section 7 said in its original form, the act will take place upon its passage by the legislature. The proposal that's here and is included in the revised motion is that the act take place upon its acceptance by the town of Concord by vote at a subsequent town meeting. So similar to the senior tax bill that we passed a couple of years ago, it went to the legislature approved it, and it came back to the town for a vote. So I'll say that now, but it's also the case in Article 26 would be the same thing, that if and when it's approved by the state legislature, the subsequent town meeting, we would bring the article back for ratification by the town.
We've discussed that also, we've discussed that with town moderator.
Yes, I've discussed
Yes.
all of these changes with town moderator and with council. And she's agreed that they are within the scope of the motion. And the motions that I passed out to you with blue highlights, I'm sorry, you can't see it, but the highlights in here with blue are the ones that I just read, and this has been provided by council.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, can I just ask you a question about the Section 7, the last point you were making? You verbally said at a subsequent annual town meeting. Is that how it's going to read? Because right now...
No, at an annual town meeting.
Okay.
May take more than a year for the legislature.
Yeah, I don't think I had inappropriate the word subsequent, but it's just at the town meeting whenever. Sometimes it takes the legislature a couple of years to get this done, don't know it's okay.
I just wanted to also bring to everyone's attention Section 4, and I'm wondering if there should, actually I'm recommending that there be a reversal of, it says all fees received pursuant to this act shall be deposited in, and that first it should say the Affordable Housing Trust Fund established pursuant to section.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Just if you're looking at the article that I gave you, you will see that the Housing Corporation, Development Corporation, it was deleted here. That was just an edit that I screwed up. But what Linda's talking about is in the warrant, it says the Housing Corporation before it says the trust. And
Correct.
she just wants to reverse that, and I think that's perfectly appropriate.
So one thing I thought we had started to discuss it, I don't recall if having made a determination, was whether to require both a vote at town meeting and a subsequent vote at the polls to institute.
I recall
The
we
real
discussed
estate
it
tax.
some, and that we thought perhaps that was sort of not necessary. I don't have-
My notes have read
I don't-
that we voted at.
I don't
the
think we
subsequent
agreed
vote
to
at
it.
the polls, but
Right.
I may have that wrong.
I don't,
But I want to at least discuss that, whether that's what we want to do, because this is not allowed. So this says we have a vote at town meeting to move forward, request permission from the legislature, that it would come back to the town at town meeting to approve. I believe, the original discussion was to have it then go to a vote at the town.
My notes said, or perhaps also to the polls. So,
So you're doing more perhaps in the bylaw?
no, our discussion. Our discussion.
perhaps. No, and I have no problem whatsoever. I think what we also discussed is before town meeting, after town meeting,
That was the.
because we have an election usually in March.
When will we
Could be included on that, but if we don't get it included until after town meeting, then we're talking about either waiting for a general election in November or having a special election, which costs money.
This is a very complicated warrant article, and it may benefit from deep discussion along the way, because there are lots of conversations will happen. So I won't be here making a
And I think
decision.
the senior tax exemption actually did have a.
Yeah, it did have
Yes, it did.
And I do think there's an advantage of that in that, a town meeting oftentimes will get 1,000 people on a particular one, but more often than not, 500 or 600, and something this important, I would agree. I think,
Give people as many opportunities to make a decision on it.
Well, I would support that completely, and I would just I would send a note to Mina maybe in the morning to make sure we have appropriate language, unless we can borrow the language from the senior tax.
To have an election.
To have an election,
As the
so
final.
it would say, its acceptance by the town of Concord by vote of approval at an annual town meeting
And subsequent
elect-
vote at a town
and a vote at an election, or whatever the right lingo is for that. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. This is
So I don't
important,
think
this
we
is
need that on,
important.
I don't think we need that on the allocation of free cash, but this is a
No, no, no.
tax.
Right,
And I think a tax has a bigger implications to people, it's a very little tax, but
No,
I think we're.
I think it's probably a good idea, because it's complicated, it is a tax. I think that gives people an opportunity that don't get to come to town meeting or canvas and express their opinions. So I totally support that.
I think these changes are a big improvement.
I think so, it softens the impact, I think, makes a couple of corrections that we should have thought that we frankly
Did you get section
didn't.
4?
So I would move to accept these changes in the motion as we discussed tonight, and subsequently vote affirmative action on Article 25.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any
And I
opposition?
would just add before you get to 26, that it will apply to both articles because they are long. When we get to town meeting and talk about this, we will have a handout. And what we will put, I think, on the board is just those things that have changed. So we can say, as printed in the town warrant, except for these 3, 4, whatever it is, changes. So if you go to Article 26 then.
So, Mike, I'm sorry, we're not required to restate the entire motion?
This will be the motion, and it will be in a handout.
Okay,
So we'll,
There's a word restriction to what you can put on the screen,
sure.
and if it exceeds that, you have to have a handout, this exceeds it.
So the same comment I made on the previous article, in section 2, I would like to reverse the order of the Affordable Housing Trust and the.
And then we would add again,
so
And-
either by, you wanted to begin with the Concord Affordable Housing Trust, or the CHGC.
So those two will be consistent.
And then we would add again to section 4 that we would be in addition to a town meeting vote.
That would be my
Subsequent
suggestion.
election.
And a townwide ballot also?
So
That would be,
that's
that
what
would be my
I
suggestion.
don't know what the right lingo is.
And do we need to say subsequent to town meeting?
I think that's clear.
No, I don't think so,
That's why I'm
because we
asking
don't
questions.
have to decide now whether we want to have the election in March or whether we want to have it,
Okay, so
whatever. So it just,
Read it.
both have to happen.
Okay.
And that was, we had the same exact discussion when we talked about the senior tax exemption. And I can't remember which way it went, but.
It was after town meeting.
So I move affirmative action on Article 26 as amended this evening.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mike, for doing all of that. We now are ready, item 13, review and approve Concord Middle School Statement of Interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for 2019. This is what has been, on 2 previous occasions, submitted and not approved, but the school committee did make a decision and I think almost a commitment that they would attempt it again. Doesn't mean that if we have, what was accepted, that necessarily they would be committed to accepting it, but they certainly would be worth reviewing and seeing what the conditions and how much funding would be. I don't know whether anybody has any comments or questions on that, or otherwise.
One small
Yes.
question, which if I can recall where it is.
There's no such thing as small questions.
Yeah, I know so. No, I can't find that one question. I may have to find where my notes went.
Was it like an editing kind of thing or such?
It was a question about how we're positioning the ask for the MSBA. There, maybe Roy can help us understand. There are categories under which you can apply for MSBA funding. Is that what those were? Are there others that we are not choosing to? Like consolidation, it makes a lot of sense to consolidate schools in one building for both learning as well as cost savings. But it was only a vague reference under a category that didn't seem like it was adequate enough to make that point. And I don't know, maybe, I don't understand what the application categories were. You chose 3 to apply under. And that, to me, feels like somewhat of a compelling argument for any administrator to make the redundancy in staff and buildings and transportation is a significant impediment.
It's here. So, I
Would
guess.
one of you, if you could come forward for the mic.
If you know the answer.
Oh, even if you don't.
That's true.
It's certainly listed here, I guess I'm just clear, if you could clarify what your question is as to.
So, okay, it looks like there are a number of different priorities under which you can apply for MSBA funding.
Right.
So, elimination of severe overcrowding is the first one. And you're, by inference, it says we've had experienced severe overcrowding since 1967. That's a really long period of severe overcrowding, and it doesn't feel to me to be compelling enough because we've been living like this for 50 years.
So the MSBA lists its order of prioritized reasons, and aside from very severe safety issues, overcrowding is number 2. So it made, in good faith effort to try to catch their attention on what they consider a priority. That's why that's listed
Well, I guess
so early.
It's just like having a 50-year-old problem doesn't make it
Wonder if
compelling to
saying
me.
something like the schools were built to accommodate X and we have Y.
Right.
As
And we had
opposed
to put in temporary classrooms.
Whatever, but give them
making
some
yes.
numbers as opposed to we've been living with it for 50 years.
I would just like our strongest push, our
What's
strongest
another-
arguments to be
What's
made
another
here.
4 or 5 years here if
Right.
you've done it for 50 years?
I mean, that's the way I.
That's fair feedback. In talking with MSBA, they've given us feedback on this, and they've been out and they've seen the reality of the conditions. And I don't get the feeling what's written here is the driving determination, because they've literally now unsuccessfully told us to just resubmit it as it is. So we'll take a look at that, and you can pend your vote on that.
You could, I mean, you could resubmit it as is, but we saw that for 2 previous submissions,
Yeah.
we weren't funded.
Right.
So if we have an opportunity to strengthen the argument, we might take advantage of that. And looking at saying that we have a 50-year-old problem doesn't feel as compelling an argument as,
Sure.
we're continually having to add mobile classrooms to the campus. They're not accessible without going outside. I heard a lot of safety concerns about why that's not the best use. So that was, I think, my
That was good. Thank you. Anybody else have?
Thanks for coming up.
So,
I would definitely support moving forward
Yeah.
with a request for further MSBA funding. And if we can make it a stronger argument, I even support that even stronger.
is that a so moved comment?
Yes, I move.
You move enthusiastically.
Thank you.
Shall I read the-
I think you probably should.
Okay.
We're all here, so.
I move,
Your motion.
I move a motion, having convened an open meeting on April 1st, 2019, and March 26th, 2019, prior to the SOI submission closing date. The Select Board and the School Committee of Concord, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated April 9th for the Concord Middle School located at 835 Old Marlborough Road and 1231 Old Marlborough Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. For priorities number 2, number 5, and number 7, with deficiencies as follows. Priority number 2, elimination of severe overcrowding. We've already discussed that piece. This condition has been addressed by use of an elementary school building being converted to use as the second middle school building in 1967. Priority number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. The 2 buildings that serve as the middle school have significant capital requirements with roofing, HVAC, and other systems reaching obsolescence after nearly 50 years. Priority number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. Having 2 buildings located a mile apart requires duplication of many services and increases staffing costs significantly. These funds could be used to improve the direct educational experiences of the middle school students housed in the Peabody and Sanborn buildings, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, or regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any further discussion?
Read again.
Feel free.
You fell asleep during part of it? Hearing no further discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Now we'll review and approve the middle school building committee charge. And we have a draft dated March 15th, Bill.
It's nice to see the new members.
Yes.
So, I had sent comments that are part of the packet, right?
Yeah, they're printed out right here. You have your comments on it, then you also have the ones provided from the schools as well.
Okay. So that's in,
They were right back to
Back.
back. Yep.
so they're
And
not yet incorporated into the
No,
final. So
and-
if we talk about, the, you know, if we believe the charge, we need to read the edited comments. How do you want to wordsmith?
Well, I have one additional, I see it's included in analysis. It was just, one of the bullets under membership is a representative from the finance department / committee. The representative has to be from the finance department, but somewhere we should, there was in a draft that I saw, I'm not sure if it's this one, later on, there was some remark about ensuring that we had an observer from the finance committee. And the reason to take it off is it just can't be another committee, which is certainly
Like
not.
an observer or
In the
liaison
room.
on the committee, exactly.
I recall that was my job, and I was in the finance committee for the Willard School. I was the observer from the middle school, so I think they can't be a member in that sense, but we should.
But I don't know whether the term representative implies necessarily they would have to be a member.
Well, aren't all these people voting people?
Yeah.
But I mean, somebody, rather than a representative, it seems to me could be somebody appointed by the finance committee and not be a member of the finance committee. They're just representing the views.
Well, why wouldn't you just have someone on the FinCom being an observer, a liaison
Rather
to the
than you
committee?
do that, although.
Because it has financial,
Yeah.
big financial implications.
I guess the difference would be if you have somebody that's actually a voting member. I mean, the financing of it is going to be as important as any aspect of the committee, what they have to deal with. Because you get somebody who's able to finance it in the lowest cost, you can be saving lots and lots of money.
So which is why I have the finance director as a member.
Yes.
You know, we have the
Yeah.
town manager, the superintendent, the middle school principal, the finance director, to me seems like
I
that.
mean, I don't know if there's somebody who does a lot of bond work, who, you know, might have certain knowledge or in.
Oh, I'm sure the finance committee could find a representative.
Well,
Yeah.
our community
So that's
members
kinda
at
what-
large, we
Yeah.
describe the things that we're looking for, you can expand on that and say, bonding, financial.
But I would rather see that come into the 5 community residents at large and still have a
Well,
liaison.
financial was in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So I assume we're talking about the town finance director or,
The town's finance
okay,
director.
and what about the school finance director?
He's on there.
He's on
Yeah.
it.
School facilities manager, director of finance operations. So those two different positions.
We recommended a trade.
Trade, so
So
delete facilities manager and
Well,
insert.
assuming, unless you want to give us another vote, but the director of finance and operations instead of
instead of the.
a vote from the facilities manager.
What about the town's finance?
That's in,
Well, that's what I said.
that's in the
That's what I
remarks.
Just be more directly.
Yeah, I mean, let's just get rid of.
I know the high school committee found it helpful to have Tony Localvo. I
Yeah.
stepped down.
Oh, that's
I had
My
that
place, and they found it very helpful.
I
A lot of
see
it
we
had
have
to do
a-
with MSBA funding, just doing the audit and all that.
We have a member of the public who would like to speak up, and
Thank you so much.
always useful, so.
Your time, thank you. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. In reading the document, on page, I believe it's page 2, it might be page 3, depending on how your particular, if you go down during design phase, there's this big discussion about the Willard project. It says, understanding the statement, reimbursement is not a certainty, and that the Willard project is proceeding during the
We
moratorium
didn't
on
get
school
that
building.
far in our edits yet.
Oh, okay,
We have
I
those too.
mean, okay, good, so we've seen that that's not appropriate, I mean, that
We
there's,
all agree.
that there's been, okay, I didn't know that you had,
We
okay,
just
thank
didn't
you.
get that far, we're only got as far so far as
Oh,
talking
okay.
about membership to the committee. We have a bunch
Okay,
of other
and then
edits
in
as well.
terms of membership to the committee and the general charge, may I address one more issue? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank you. I don't feel that there's sufficient language in the opening to include 2 points. One is it's mentioned, but deep community engagement in the discussion. I think that one of the things that will, in many ways, support the study and the effort moving forward will come from the community feeling that they're engaged in this discussion, with the planning committee. It may be axiomatic, one may think of course they will be, but I think it needs to be, perhaps the accent on that little syllable might be a bit stronger. And my second point is that if you look at the Feingold study, there were some other options. Now I know that after lots of consideration and discussion, the consensus is that we should have just one building. But my antennae tell me that in the community there are still lots of questions about why not just add to or change, if we work this out so that we don't have to have a whole new single building. And I know that there are many good reasons why it's being written this way, but I think giving an opportunity for the community to hear in detail why. You'll see right in the opening the construction of a single new middle school building. Rather than saying a single new middle school building, to construction of a new middle school or of a new middle school construction, which would just open it up a little bit for the community to have an open dialogue. I think that it's the school committee and people who've been attending to this have paid very close attention to why the one school building makes sense. But for many, this is still a big question. So I don't know what you do with that, but I would just offer that as a consideration. Thank you.
So let's go through some, if you want to edit this
Yes.
down to that.
Yeah.
I think the point of public outreach is we should think about if it's strong enough and if the comment should be considered. At the Climate Action Advisory Board this last week, there was a request that the sustainability director be a member of the committee. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I said I put it out there, but that came from the Climate Action Advisory Board. And I would expect that they would want to be in have an observer role as well.
I actually think it is a good idea, because I think that's one way to get kind of the whole town's interest involved in this. And I think that would be helpful, but I agree, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Right. I actually support that. I also think that the greater engagement of the sustainability director and that whole conversation may also bring in or access design details that support, that bring in other funds. So
That's true.
So is this
but I don't know whether how you reflect that person.
Yeah, is this a recommendation in addition to the one resident knowledgeable in the field of sustainable building?
Do you have the edited version that you could just look at, because it's red line?
She's suggesting
Without
it,
having to take notes, you can just use
you're
it.
suggesting it as a member,
Yep.
not a skill that we need.
As a
But it may be instead of the one resident knowledgeable, I mean, you specifically who that resident would be, whether you need both of them.
I didn't get that far in the
Yeah.
discussion. I think the recommendation from the climate board was that the sustainability director be a member of this school building committee to bring that sustainability interest.
Yeah.
I think the committee was also interested in having a liaison role to the board, to this school building committee, which I think is also appropriate. So you're asking whether we need another sustainability voice, if somebody,
I think
That's that
that's, the
expertise.
select board is going to be making these determinations, so.
So that other sustainability voice then, if people felt strongly about the director's position, could be added to the description of community members wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, Alice, on the one hand, I'm totally supportive of somebody who knows what the heck is going on here. But if you look at, there's 5 community members, and there's really a lot of school committee or town employees. I think having it be somebody in the sustainability community as a citizen,
Rather than the sustainability.
rather than the sustainability director. The skill we need is important, and we need to have that in there. Not, well, it's not, to me, it's not a huge difference, but I prefer to see some additional citizens on this, taking the point that was made about community involvement.
Nick Pappas, 300 Virginia Road. I'm on the Sustainability Committee Chair, the Climate Action Advisory Board properly. And there's several members in the committee. I'm not sure, unless Kate Hanley told you that she specifically wanted to be. There may be someone else in the committee who would have the characteristics you're talking about.
You can't be on two committees.
Pardon?
If you're on the
okay.
advisory board, you cannot also be on the school building committee.
Okay, good.
Although
But we have other members
although
coming.
we can make exceptions to that.
I don't.
I'm not suggesting we should, but.
I was only meaning to suggest that there's a bigger pool in this case.
But I guess what I took away from that meeting was that there was a request for both.
I guess I was making my comments more in terms of making sure that our office, of our sustainability director's office is heavily engaged, because through that office, we may have access as a town to opportunities that an individual with experience, that doesn't convey the weight of the town. Exactly, green communities funding, there are a whole lot of net zero school buildings that are starting to move, so.
I mean, I don't know if she even has the
I
time or
did speak to
ability
her about
to.
it today. She said she'd be willing to serve if that was the board's decision, if you're interested. I asked her to talk with Elise Woodward, who's an architect and also advocate for,
Right.
green buildings. And Elise said she thought it might be helpful during the design stage in particular. During construction, no, when all the decisions have been made, that wouldn't be so helpful. But during the design stage, when decisions are being made or options are being studied, Elise thought it would be helpful.
Thank you, Fred.
Another concern I had was if you.
So did we then think that both need to stay on there, or could we move the,
I think Chris was making the point supporting Alice that it's the sustainability director
yeah,
that
and
is a
then
member. We can certainly add sustainability
to the
to the
community?
list of skills. I don't
Right.
see why not. We've got the finance director in finance.
Yeah. Okay, I just
We've
wanted to
got
be,
a lot of educators and educational technology.
just wanted to be clear. Thanks.
If you go to section C, powers and duties, it has three components. The first one is called during design phase, the second is called feasibility study phase. The bullets in here suggest switching them, the order of them. I think that's appropriate. But then the third section is during design and construction. And I think we just need to strike the word design. If you look at what's in there, it's all construction related, it's not design related. So, it should be feasibility, design, and construction as the three areas in there.
So start with feasibility, then we go to design.
Yeah, feasibility comes first, then design, then not design and construction, but construction.
So, okay. You're right, cut and paste that. And move it up. I offered some language in the design phase, which you can accept or not.
Actually, in the,
Which included the comments, I think, that
Yeah.
we heard from Diane.
I think those are appropriate. You also made a comment which I would support under the what was design and construction phase, the language change, and I think it's a good one. Simply moving from complete the project to ensure the project comes in on schedule, on time.
So under the design phase, we had a suggestion that made sense. It originally was adding foster a environmental, educational, and sustainable building design discussion.
I'm sorry, what's that one? Under construction?
Yeah, it looks like a change here for foster discussion of, it's about fifth bullet down under design phase. It ended up really focusing on net zero and greenhouse gases, right? But originally we had, whether it's there or somewhere else we had a suggestion that the emphasis should be on fostering a discussion of environmental, educational, and sustainable building design concepts. So that the sustainability will apply to environmental and educational issues as well. So the way your rewrite is here, it could be added as an additional bullet, I guess.
Didn't see that, and I don't see it being taken out.
What bullet is it on the
So it's the fifth bullet.
non-analysis bullet?
On the original draft that we looked at, it was the fifth bullet down under during the design phase.
Foster.
Mhm. No, you foster
Under sustainable building design concepts. Oh, you're adding educational, environmental, and sustainable design? So, I was expounding on the sustainable design to include net zero.
Yeah, I can see that. But in the process, I think we've lost the other two concepts, which we're also trying to look ahead in terms of flexibility and sustainability.
For educational,
And for the record,
Environmental and
bullet 8 and
sustainable.
9, so this will
just
be
adding those
right.
two words.
So the next set of remarks that is in your analysis is under communication, and she's highlighted for us the entire section. The issue is that the section here under communication is that we're talking about is the one called the town manager. And essentially the statement is that the town manager has final approval regarding all financial matters and is responsible for all contracts related to the subject. The middle school building committee shall have primary responsibility for making decisions.
And he's on that committee.
Huh?
And he's on, or she's on it.
Therefore, so the question is this necessary given that he's on the committee? Yes, it is. Because we're the committee, Chris is on it, we vote 5-2 on something. Chris still has a response, he can vote yes or no, but he still has a responsibility as a town manager to decide whether or not to do that. So I think it is important that you're articulating the responsibility as not a committee member, but the town manager.
So bullet number 1, or not number, the first bullet says engage the town manager throughout the project as needed.
Redundant.
Right, so the person's on the committee.
Redundant on the one hand, but I don't have any problem with it there, because the committee's work, if they come up with something, it's their responsibility to go to town manager and say, here's what the committee did, here's what we think is the
But he's
right
on the
thing.
committee, he would know, or she would know.
I get it.
Okay, so that's fine, if you like it, fine. We can have it in there.
But I don't
I see
think
your
it
point.
hurts to articulate the committee's responsibility to keep the town manager informed, because he has a different set of responsibilities. And that isn't just to be a good committee guy, but he's the one who's actually gonna execute the stuff.
And just my experience is construction meetings, there's meetings outside of the committee's main meeting where things develop and options are, change orders, that sort of thing. Often that doesn't go to the full committee, it goes
No, there's a
directly to
subcommittee.
the contracting authority.
So I get your point, Alice. but-
Okay, I'm hearing. Okay.
And then on I guess it's page 6, under maybe it's on page 5 here. The project management firm, Alice is, I think we inserted the word owner's project manager. That's
Right.
what he's been, or she's been referred to before, so I think. So I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we're also addressing Diane's comment about where does it state explicitly the role of the committee is for community engagement? And so if we go back up and look at purpose, that's probably where it would belong. It has multiple purposes. Placing and maybe it gets inserted in here.
Well, I think it could be added to the last sentence in that paragraph. The building committee should be the point of contact for all community groups and all issues regarding it is the expectation the committee will engage, I don't know what the right word is, but will engage the community to ensure their involvement and knowledge about what the heck is going on. Better language than that.
That's not a good word.
No, it's not. Keep it I think we could just get another sentence in there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have the final sentence remind everybody that this is, yeah, reporting to the town.
So there's only, looking at some of these comments that we've already discussed, there's only one other thing that I raised that I'll raise again and just see what people think. On page 5, before D, where we're talking about the final report from the committee, with the, final report to the select board, et cetera. I was wondering if we should incorporate something about including in that final report a list of unfinished projects not included in the as-built construction with estimated costs and a projected timeline for completion. And there, we may want to use other words, but my concept there was that budget constraints.
Right, I mean, like parking lot and.
Yeah, exactly.
Drive-through.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What,
And so that we're value engineered out and on the wish list for
Right,
completion.
and that's still in the, the
Yeah.
committees and the leadership mind know that they're going to address in the future, and then these things come at us, but they were well aware that this was still on their,
Yeah, and it's a good place to remind everybody that if we put it aside, it's gonna come back.
Why not?
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Are we up at the language in there?
yeah, I can,
Okay.
I'll give it to Andrew.
Great.
It says review and approve. Should we wait, I think, until we get the additions and maybe do
A
it?
lot of things to
Yeah.
make sure that we're. And
Yeah.
I'll send you what my notes said.
Please.
We're not gonna wanna really try to act on this until after town meeting anyway, so, we could, at one of our little half-hour meetings, we might, thing to have.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you, everyone. Agenda item 15, discuss letter read Route 2 rotary improvement. And that's the memo from Rich that came, I believe, on Saturday, or Friday.
So the Route 2 Rotary project is not currently on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, for the foreseeable future. So you have an opportunity to lobby for it to get on there. Still might not be on for years to come, but I think it won't get on at all unless the board gets it.
I thought it was on the list for 2043.
We're not on the list, we don't even move up.
Oh, we bounce. I think that was one.
Get it
So I,
to 35.
They've been very responsive to our letters thus far, so.
doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to get on the tip.
We should.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So
And
does that need a motion?
there was a draft letter, so it does need a
Are we
motion.
ready for a motion?
Unless anybody has further discussion, sounds like we're ready.
Okay, you need to authorize the chair to sign and transmit the letter to the Metropolitan Planning Organization substantially adopted.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And we are now ready to review the board plans for town meeting presentations and statements. We have a list that was provided of speakers list and time assignment. And so would you want,
You need to add who's presenting first, what article do you want to present on,
right.
and who's going to present.
We have on 23, the primary speaker being Mike, with the second speaker being you, Alice. That's the affordable housing development, the 500,000 out of.
Well, while that's okay to put it like that, really that's not exactly what's gonna happen, because what Carmen intends to do, what the moderator intends to do is introduce all of these articles at one time, saying we're now gonna deal with 4 affordable housing articles. I'm going to address the overview about why this is important and why we're doing it. Todd Benjamin is going to get a brief summary of what his committee has done, how they came to the conclusions they did, and then when the individual articles come up, Alice is going to speak for the committee on each particular item, explaining what it is and the like. So I think it's okay to write it like this.
Have the
But
understanding of
it's
the knowledge.
a little different.
Yeah. Just the only question, I don't see it as being an item which is gonna have a lot of controversy, but whether item 27, which is the portion of the Giroux land, which is authorizing the transfer to the, for affordable housing. Do we feel we have a need for a backup person, or?
That seems to be pretty well
I would think it's,
covered.
yeah.
Kate's done a
Yeah,
very, very
yeah.
comprehensive job, I can't imagine that.
29,
Yeah.
29, I guess I will be the third speaker.
Okay.
So 20,
Formula business.
Matt is going to speak as a member of the planning board,
Yeah.
and then I think Mr. Dane has some legal concerns about it. And then I will offer remarks for us.
Have you told the moderator how many minutes you need?
I haven't,
Yeah,
she's
okay.
given me, I've forgotten, but I got it.
Yeah, you have it, right?
I think something like 4 minutes or something.
so are there no other speakers for the building permit fee?
I'm sorry?
Are there no other speakers for the permit?
I'm
The
sure
building
there
permit?
is, and this is just incomplete, but I don't know.
That'll be part of your,
No, I think what Alice means is, for example, the second speaker on 25 is Dean Banfield from the Finance Committee, and then the third speaker is Terry Rothenberg. So the question is there a
Are they both
Finance
also going to
Committee
speak on the
person
next
speaking on 26,
I think Holly Darzan from the,
Thoughts Committee?
not Todd's committee, well, yes, she's there, but she's also Concord Housing Foundation.
Oh,
I believe she is the speaker.
On Article 26?
yeah. But
Yes.
again, our issue here is making sure we have our
Right.
speakers here.
So we're covered there.
I think that the other two articles that we, I don't know what's listed here. So for Article 24, I'll probably speak to that article. Middle school feasibility study.
okay,
That's the trust
Huh?
14?
fund. Not 24,
14.
14, sorry.
I already have Lori, school committee, finance committee, and then
It just have a select board. We need to have somebody speak to that.
it would seem like it's the middle school that we should have a select board member speaking to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or do you want to do that one? If you
I'm
have
happy. Yeah, I'm happy.
Liaison to the
Sure,
schools?
yeah.
Do you know how much time you need, Tom?
I wouldn't think more than 3. I would think 3.
Similarly, I think we need to have somebody speak to Article 16.
Yeah.
But that's gonna be hard since we don't have a vote.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
Well, still, yes, I understand that, but we still, I mean, there's gonna be background to remarks, you could get it, we need to get it assigned to somebody.
We do need to get it assigned, but if I might be the outlier voter, I can't tell. I don't know what our straw vote looks like, so I'm not gonna volunteer for that one.
I'm interested in
I don't
hearing a
know.
bit more in terms of, I mean,
I think we all are.
yeah.
It'll be hard, so we have to write fast and have short statements to do comment on it. Or,
Well, then we say it's a little bit like the Supreme Court, we don't know who's gonna be in the majority, who's the minority speaker. So,
and we don't have a lot of time to write an opinion.
I suppose we could, request 3 minutes and then, whoever's
We'll fill it
comfortable
in
at
in
it,
May.
yeah.
I think so, and it would be good if we could assign somebody, because even if you don't know exactly how you're gonna come down, there's still gonna be some
Issues.
set of remarks that you're gonna wanna be talking about, and then how we actually made a decision about it. We're not gonna know until we know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that one as well.
I think it would be good
Yeah.
if you did.
Sure.
Basically, historically, I'm sorry, I can't remember, historically spoken to the CPA.
Not unless, to take an exception, typically the moderator indicates the board has voted to support the CPA spending project, so.
Only when we were, for instance, when we were looking for money from the CPA for specific
Well,
junction
we had
roads,
something.
Yeah.
Or something is pulled out from,
Right,
outside, yeah, I think we had letter G one year.
Right, but they're,
That came out off the consent.
Municipal capital projects, I see we've got Kate Hodgman, and it looks like we've got people from the library. Trustees, I don't know whether
So that,
there's
so,
anything further we need, or,
You have voted to support the project,
Yeah.
if you want to, and the moderator will relay that, and
yeah. I don't see any great need, but if somebody wants to,
Let's see.
okay.
if somebody at some point feels like it would help,
right, I mean, I'm happy to put my name in there if we need the support, but I don't think we need to belabor the town
Yeah,
meeting just to
yeah.
hear my voice.
you wanna put your office back up if we have further conversations? That's Article 7.
Anybody think of anything else we need? Anyone want to do solid waste? Okay, then I think we're-
Please, let me.
Now.
Guess we are ready for public comments. If anybody would like to make any public comment? I'm not seeing any. We are ready now for liaison report.
I don't have any other ones
Okay.
to report.
I
Other
don't
than,
have any.
I have a few in that I've attended school committee meetings. There were 2 recently, and they all have to do with, there was lots of presentations that are fairly lengthy, but discussion basically a lot about what we talked about tonight. And I think they've done a very good job of reaching out and trying to address concerns that people had about various issues. And working with Kate Hanley. She discussed the efforts of obtaining additional electric bus. It could be 80% funded with state funds. There's a new Alcott principal appointed. They've been working with the Board of Health on the vaping issue and school safety. And as was announced, Public Works Director Rich has been terrific, and Nick Pappas appeared and discussing the climate action advisory input. He discussed a proposal of carbon offset proposal that they're going to be looking at. The library committee met on the 19th. The Fowler Library librarian was named to a panel in the Newbery Awards, which recognizes the children's books. And it's really quite an impressive honor to have her be part of the panel. She was interested, said she read over 700 children's books in order to be able to do the grading. And apparently they rotate, but sort of once every 4 or 5 years. But it was nice publicity. And as people probably remember, the Ceremony and Celebrations Committee had an event honoring the honored citizen this year, Diana Clymer. It was a great event, recognizing her over 50 years of volunteerism with the special recognition of starting the Restorative Justice Initiative and working with inmates at MCI Concord. Mike Barrett came and gave a very nice talk about how much that has meant and kind of the ripple effect of sometimes these volunteer activities. And the Commission on Disability talked about membership, lock boxes for citizens, and the adaptive bike share program. And they're going to be putting together a new brochure, so they've been very active.
I attended the NRC and the HGC. The NRC discussed the largest portion of the agenda was focused on, I think it's 360, I'm going to get the number wrong, Old Bedford Road, which is a plan, yeah, it's a planned development, planned residential development called Concord Culinary. And there's still a lot to be discussed. I mean, it was clear that there's not consensus around the areas that touch the sensitive floodplain, that there's concerns about the density of the construction, and there was even a discussion of whether or not it was an overreach to put the effort into creating a farm on such a limited space, farm and/or the number of buildings. So I believe the proponents, or the Zuratius and his colleagues, are going to have more to do. I was able to listen to a presentation of the library once again at the HGC, the new library project, and I think having witnessed the HGC's concerns about what the results of the Concord Museum were as compared to their approved design plans or their approved plans. I think the library is being asked a lot of questions that a more educated HGC is asking. So I think they were really, I wouldn't say it was opinion positive or negative, it was just far more engaged on details right up front. And then I also can say I heard from a number of public citizens in the room who were quite impassioned about the design plans as they are. So that too is a project that is not finished in its
Getting citizen input.
Getting citizen input at all, or committee approvals. I mean, HTC is a powerful committee.
I attended the Climate Action Advisory Board, I think you all have heard the updates on that one. And the Historical Commission, the project at 1075 Lowell Road is being continued to April 25th, for those who are interested in following that one. There's a fairly large crowd that turned out and were turned away by this, for the continuance. And there's a discussion that I think is of interest in, from the Historical Commission to see whether they're going to begin investigating, working with the planning department, whether they could require whenever a home is demolished to do a sustainable demolishing project, just like the town does in the projects that we take down, to see whether that would allow for the salvaging of doorknobs and fixtures and paneling if it were available as part of the demolition review bylaw.
Tom, I will just, you finished, Alice? Yeah, I will just mention two that I did get to last, at least two that I got to last week. Well, one was the Affordable Housing Funding Committee, and they have just worked so incredibly hard this whole last year, and obviously we're seeing that come to the town meeting. But the second meeting I went to was the planning board meeting, and I went to that because affordable housing, two speakers were going to speak to affordable housing at that meeting in a continuing education series that the chair is doing for the planning board as they think about moving next year and considering zoning changes and so forth. So Barbara Morris spoke based on her participation on Envision Concord and had some comments there. And Liz Russ also spoke about where we stood in terms of current numbers and also trying to help sort out for the planning board definition of affordable, that's a housing that's subsidized, and affordable housing that is still needs to be built that may or may not be subsidized. So those are two that I should probably highlight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I also wanted to add one other, my memory's a little foggy as are my eyes. And that was the relocation of the Bob Benson barn was brought up actually at the NRC because they hold the conservation restriction at the Wheeler Harrington House. And that's one of the properties that's discussed or being discussed as potentially a location. Nothing is, it was just simply an item worth noting, and it was fascinating to think about it. Think about, actively putting that somewhere and what incredible shape the actual remnants of the barn are in. Oh,
So it was just recently assessed in the last couple of years where a reconstruction archivist came and detailed every part that's been stored in the wastewater treatment plant. There's a trailer box.
Right, that holds it.
So it's.
We were afraid it might find just sawdust.
No, it doesn't get. Apparently, that a pod is a good, or a trailer is a container.
Right.
Before you do the next item, could I give a brief update on the town manager?
Yes, please. That's great.
So the town manager search process that we're engaged in, the committee will be meeting in executive session this Thursday, beginning at 7:30 in the morning, to consider the candidacy of 15 individuals. And at the conclusion of our meeting on Thursday, it's our hope that we will have reduced that number to some set of semifinalists, some in the neighborhood of 6. There's no criteria for how many exactly, but some number that we would like to invite in for interviews. Those interviews will take place on April 25th in executive session by the search committee. And at the conclusion of that meeting, or the following morning if we need additional time, we will recommend then finalists, if you will, to the select board. And the select board will convene on April 27th, a Saturday. I don't know if we've set the time yet or not, but I think sometime in the morning here in the townhouse, where the select board will interview the finalists, whatever number that is, and will then make a recommendation as to the next town manager. And following that meeting then, the select board will be in negotiations with the potential new town manager to see if we can craft a contract. So things are moving along and,
On schedule, on budget.
well, definitely on budget. Other than that,
And we're on schedule.
we're on schedule and it looks pretty promising, some very interesting candidates, so it will be an interesting meeting on Thursday.
Thank you. We're now ready for miscellaneous and correspondence. So I have a couple. You have a couple of those? Okay, well, I have one from William Duggan, Scoutmaster of Troop 132, and Curtis Yeckel, Committee Chair, Troop 132, informing me that two young men from Massachusetts Spirit of Adventure Council, Troop 132, have recently attained rank of Eagle Scout, and asking if I would write congratulatory letters to them, and I'd be happy to do so.
I move to authorize the chair to send congratulatory letters to our newest Eagle Scouts.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I also have a draft of a letter to Mr. Stephen Hoftak, General Manager of the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, writing to inform him the condition of the West Concord Depot building and suggesting that perhaps there might be some way to remedy or improve that. And this was, I think, as a result of a couple of citizens sort of raised it to us, and since the board itself does not have jurisdiction, this was the proper approach. So I would also like a motion authorizing me to sign that letter.
Authorize the chair to sign the letter substantially as presented this evening.
Second.
And discussion, just a brief discussion on that. I noticed when I looked, we saw a draft of this letter, did we not? I didn't see Tammy Gouveia listed on the PCs, and I also was wondering if she should be.
Yes.
And also, when you sign as chair, particularly on this letter, do you list the other select board members? Because I was thinking it might be helpful to.
The CC in essence, or?
Yeah, CC, yeah.
Okay. No, I think it was listed representatives, but not completed her name, so, but she was intended to be included.
Okay, good.
Probably a matter of trying to get the spelling correct.
Just because of who it's going to,
Yeah.
I just.
Right.
But we can certainly CC the other. So I think we have to still take the vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and I guess we are now ready for committee nominations.
Although I have one, make sure everybody
Oh.
noticed, and we probably, I don't know if everybody received an invitation.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Yes, it's lovely. So there's the rededication of the Melbourne Memorial, all invited. On Sunday, June 16th at 2 p.m. at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and it's been totally refurbished, polished, it's beautiful. If you happen to take a look at it, you should walk up to Sleepy Hollow and come to the rededication ceremony.
To which the Concord cannons will be fired.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wake the dead. Nominations.
I also have two nominations that were not included in the agenda, so they're
Do you want to
Do we
nominate?
want to do the, yeah, ready
Okay.
first.
I nominate Catherine Mast of 38 Blueberry Lane to the Historic District Commission as associate member, and Kate McKierney of 30 Union Street to the planning board. And I further nominate, let's see if I can find the names here, Maria Madison of 165 Cambridge Turnpike to the Concord Center Cultural District Committee, as well as Kimberly Burns of 111 or 1165 Monument Street to the Concord Cultural District Committee, Concord Center Cultural District Committee.
We might be able to get those appointed next.
That would be
next
great.
week, yeah.
They've been
With that, I think we're ready for the final.
I move to adjourn.
You have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you all.